Hi, if you're just joining us, I'm Matilda Gregg, the lead organiser for this workshop. This paper is part of a panel called Nationalism and Propaganda, which is essentially concerned with the question of agency. In other words, who has control over the story? Women warriors often make great subjects for news stories, books, or art, and workshops, because they often seem exceptional, inspirational, attention-grabbing. Over the years, many different governments have realised this and put these stories to use for strategic, diplomatic, or cultural reasons. The videos in this panel explore different examples of this in modern France, Turkey, and China, and also ask how, by contrast, the women at the centre of these stories might be able to exploit their fame for their own devices. Watch this video to find out more about women revolutionaries with magical powers, the power of opera, and Mao's Cultural Revolution. Our next speaker is Karen Wang. Karen completed a bachelor's degree in art history and arts management at the University of Toronto in 2019. She is now studying for a master's degree in East Asian Studies at Yale University. Her research interests include early modern woodblock prints, wine culture in late Qing and Republican China, and 20th century Chinese visual culture, especially the representations of militia women in art and media. In addition to her academic life, Karen has accumulated hands-on experience in curating collections of photographs in art museums in the People's Republic of China. The title of her paper today is From Magical to Martial, The Evolution of the Representations of the Red Lanterns in 20th Century Chinese Visual Culture. Thank you very much.
The Boxer Uprising in China at the turn of the 20th century has been regarded mainly as a male-dominant event in which women boxers are often overlooked and downplayed. Clad in and equipped with red lanterns, fans, and handkerchiefs, the Red Lanterns was one of the female groups of the boxers who was viewed by the general public as the possessors of magic that was more powerful than that of their male counterparts. Despite the flamboyant appearance and radical nature of the group, many historians have considered them as only a minor phenomenon within the Boxer Uprising. The Red Lanterns were for the most part non-militant teenage girls and young unmarried women. As historian Paul Cohen has noted, although there are occasional, and in his opinion questionable references from oral history materials attesting to their direct participation in combat, the Red Lanterns were best known at the time for their extraordinary magical powers. In the Boxer siege against the North Church in Beijing, a reproduction of a surviving woodblock print, two red lanterns are depicted in the upper register riding upon clouds. One of them is casting protective magic around the male boxers in the battlefront. In addition to their magical duties, they were also responsible for completing logistical tasks, such as providing the sick or injured with medical aids, cooking, and transmitting military intelligence. The Red Lanterns were unique and defiant in the eyes of contemporary foreigners and Chinese people because they publicly exposed themselves as women to the male gaze. This conspicuous transgression of gender norms in late Qing China often fascinated onlookers and provoked wild imaginations. Their famous practice, stamping the city, a visually mesmerizing, ritualized parade in the street, conveyed a sense of ethereal mystique. The Red Lanterns quickly became an enchanting and versatile subject, from which contemporary and later mythologizers drew great inspiration. So this paper examines a series of materials on the representations of the Red Lanterns across mediums in the 20th century in a roughly chronological order. I probe how and why their images evolved from non-militant women with evident feminine characteristics in the late Qing dynasty and the Republic of China, that is, from the 1910s to the 40s, to militant, masculinized, and heroic women warriors in the People's Republic of China after 1949. I argue that the transformation of their images into women warriors in the socialist period was closely related to, if not a direct result, of Chairman Mao Zedong's 1958 Everyone a Soldier campaign, a nationwide militarization of ordinary citizens in line with the leader's own national defense doctrines. Of the rich range of materials examined in this paper, I pay close attention to the Red Lanterns Peking Opera, a work developed by the National Peking Opera House following Mao's direct instructions. It is a work that offers a revealing prism through which domestic politics and propaganda mechanism become observable. Since video recordings of the opera are not accessible, my investigation is based on the reconstruction of the work from fragmented sources, including stage photographs, scripts, coeval news reports, and memoirs. So from the 1910s to the 30s, while male boxers had captured the attention and imagination both domestically and internationally, the Red Lanterns too were ardently mythologized by Western and Chinese writers, artists, and filmmakers alike. Edith Ferri's 1911 novel, The Red Lantern, for example, tells the tragic life of a Eurasian girl who performs the goddess of the Red Lantern light for the Boxers to deceive the Chinese. As one of the most talked about novels of the decade, it was later adapted into a silent drama film in 1919. The Red Lantern film, directed by Albert Kaplany and stars Alana Zimova, was an instant success in the United States. Teeming with exotic costumes and decorations, the film embodies the American Orientalism in popular culture in the early 20th century. It represents stereotyped Chinese traditions and the dangers of interracial love, among other Oriental fantasies. While American audiences didn't find any problems with the way the Chinese were portrayed, a group of Chinese American intellectuals expressed their dissatisfaction loudly in newspapers. They accused the film's production company of distorting facts and misattributing the cause of the Boxer Uprising to racial antipathy between the East and the West, so as to poison the innocent public of America concerning this well-known but little understood Chinese episode. When the film was shown in China in the early 20s, the most influential commercial newspaper of pre-1949 China tagged it as a film of national humiliation, which enacts China's most painful history. The screening period of the film was extended, however, due to its unexpected popularity. One Chinese journalist commented that the storyline of the film was bizarre enough to be a fantasy novel. Besides Orientalism and fantasy, visual cultures in both China and America in this period foregrounded the femininity and sexuality of the Red Lanterns. An illustration published in the World Pictorial in Shanghai in 1923 portrays a flirtatious Red Lantern sister in the foreground. She is depicted in a slightly leaning pose with her face turning to the side as if she is wantonly inviting spectating. The whitened creases at the lower portion of her trousers and the dark shoes highlight her bare ankles. The white folding fan in her hand contrasts with the presumably red cheongsam, drawing the audience's attention to the upper part of her body. The plain headband worn by historical Red Lanterns is replaced with an exquisite hairdo similar to the style of a contemporary courtesan. Visual cultures, Eastern and Western, underscored the femininity and sexuality of the Red Lanterns before 1949, characteristics that would be profoundly altered after the founding of the PRC. Chairman Mao Zedong, the most potent and influential mythologizer of the Red Lanterns in history, transformed the pre-existing non-militant feminine images of the group into militant, courageous, and patriotic women warriors in New China. At a party on March 25, 1964, Mao advised the staffers of the National Peking Opera House to put the stories of the Red Lanterns on stage. He described the female boxers as a group of young women who practiced martial arts holding red lanterns under the moon. They were incredibly brave and attempted to fight their way to Beijing to kill the Emperor's dowager and kick the imperialists out of China. Mao, who was also a prolific poet, conjured up a romantic and artistic image of a band of daring nationalist female warriors participating in real historical fights. After receiving the chairman's instructions, the Opera House swiftly developed a project plan and sent creative staff out to conduct research. Yet with the commencement of the Cultural Revolution in 1966, Mao's wife Jiang Qing, who oversaw various cultural spheres and promoted socialist purity in art, discouraged the production of performing arts in traditional themes, a scope within which the Red Lanterns Opera falls. This caused the suspension of the project. The work remained dormant until the end of the Cultural Revolution and was revived by the opera house staff as a gesture of reaffirming Mao's legacy and counter-striking the Gang of Four, a group of radical political leaders headed by Jiang Qing during the Cultural Revolution. Mao's mythologization of the Red Lanterns was stimulated by his Everyone a Soldier campaign launched a few years earlier. It was an unprecedented nationwide militarization of ordinary citizens closely related to China's national defense strategy in the nuclear age and the Great Leap Forward in economic development, a campaign seeking to accomplish China's industrialization at lightning speed. If the goal of the propaganda in the first 2 years of the campaign was to promote the campaign itself, its publicity after 1960 likely assumed a new function for Mao on a personal level. Mao's Great Leap Forward, which led to a great famine and tens of millions of deaths, and other public and individual issues, had endangered his reputation. The featuring of Mao prominently with the militia women in media and works of art was part of the effort to rebuild Mao's image in both the civilian and the military spheres in a time of crisis. The Red Lanterns Opera was incubated by propagandists within this historical context. Being an avid promoter of his campaign, Mao wrote a poem in February 1961 after seeing a photograph that captures a morning drill. He praises the heroic female militia and their taste in style. So spirited and heroic, with rifles 5 feet long, at early dawn you shine on drilling place. Daughters of China with a marvelous veil, you prefer military equipment to red silk. In the first version of this verse, Mao used the term military adornment, but later he changed it to military equipment to make the message more explicit. Through this poem, Mao gave prominence to a new, energetic social group whose identities were marked by their weapons. While the Red Lanterns Opera was being suspended, artists visualized Mao's conception of the Red Lantern warriors in other mediums, as demonstrated in the Boxers and the Battle of Langfang, an oil painting by the realist painter Daize in 1971. A group of red lanterns clad in red dresses on the left are holding swords and charging fearlessly towards foreign soldiers. Reborn in New China with spears and swords, the red silk of the historical Red Lanterns, frills that were undesirable among daughters of China according to Mao, disappeared. The Red Lanterns were successfully transformed into glorious exemplars of women warriors for contemporary militia women in the PRC. Now the question is why the image of militant women was regarded ideal to market the Everyone a Soldier campaign, and why in the form of opera in particular. First, among the images of women promoted in Mao's China, women warriors and soldiers were the most exciting images that could inspire wild imaginations in comparison with, for instance, robust female factory workers or tractor drivers. Second, as Louise Edwards has noted, women warriors have great potential to shame men into action. Increasing male citizens' participation in militia was the ultimate goal of the government, since it was and still is mainly men who fight in battles. The symbolic power of women warriors, however, must be carried and delivered through appropriate artistic mediums. Chinese operas were a favorable art form among the targeted audience of the Everyone a Soldier campaign, the rural peasants. Being a locally and historically grounded form of performance spanning across diverse regions, opera had assembled vast repertoires of traditional subjects. Communist propagandists before 1949 had already accumulated decades of experience in creating operatic works appealing to the rural audiences in ways that are both educational and entertaining, powerful and compelling. In the 60s and early 70s, militia women as a collective also gained a public relations function and diplomatic dimension. Reports, photographs, and works of art in China frequently promoted the feats and deeds of women's militia in other socialist countries, including Russia, Cuba, and Benin. News with their images and illustrations received prominent coverage in official publications, such as People's Daily and People's Pictorial, creating a strong sense of international solidarity among women. The party frequently invited local militia women to demonstrate their competitive sharpshooting skills for diplomatic visitors from abroad. When Pakistan's political leaders toured Shanghai in 1965, a militia of women were called up to compete with each other in shooting. One of the leaders was said to have been very impressed and remarked that other countries' regular armies can't shoot as well as your militia. If the US attacks, you can defeat her. Having been interrupted by the 10-year turbulent revolution, the Red Lanterns Peking Opera was finally put on stage on October 6, 1977. It was featured as one of the core artistic programs celebrating the National Day of the PRC. The Opera House brought to life Mao's romantic and poetic conceptualization of the Red Lanterns, carrying real and shining lanterns and practicing martial arts under the moon. A group of young Red Lantern warriors are waving swords and bending bows in their camp in Tianjin. This is the night before a joint Boxer Red Lantern force attacked the Russian troops at a railway station. Artists who make palm-sized picture books imitated and reproduced the dramatic images of the Red Lanterns on stage, further buttressing their militant representation and boosting the dissemination of such portrayals in print among the masses in the late 70s and early 80s. Top party leaders, including Hua Guofeng, Mao's successor, and Deng Xiaoping, the vice chairman who later toppled Hua and became the chairman, went to watch the opera as a group. Resurrecting works of art barred by Jiang Qing after the Cultural Revolution was often claimed by party leaders and art practitioners as a conscientious return to Mao's thought, and was also a way to dissociate themselves from the Gang of Four. But the Red Lanterns opera served more purposes. It not only assumed its original propagandist function envisioned by Mao, but also became a way through which top leaders manifested their political stance and buttressed their authority. The Red Lantern warriors were promoted by the government at an interesting juncture of discussions over China's national defense strategy and economic policy in the post-Mao era. The fall of the Gang of Four cleared the way for resuming the military reform program engineered by Deng in 1975. However, competition for limited resources had made the future course and pace of the army's modernization a contentious issue between military planners and those charged with revitalizing the civilian economy. The conflict was later resolved in June 1977, 4 months earlier than the premiere of the Red Lanterns opera. The result was a continued reliance on Mao's national defense doctrines, including the mass militia system. The opera, a work initiated by Mao and a piece endorsing the image of loyal, nationalist women warriors, couldn't be more fitting in honoring this decision. While both Deng and Hua agreed to resume Mao's militia campaign, their motivations were rather different. As Mao's chosen successor with yet mediocre talent, Hua had to strengthen his power and status by constantly referring to the great leader. Hua's to whatever's statement that all the Chinese needed to do to achieve a happy future was to obey whatever Mao had said and to ensure the continuation of whatever he had decided, clearly signals his political strategies. Although Hua did not compose a verse for the militia in the way that Mao had, he penned calligraphy calling for strengthening militia forces originated by Mao. Local propagandists in Hunan province, where Hua served in the local government for more than 2 decades, published a book with 53 short stories about local militias and the photographs of Hua interacting with them during his term of office. The book cover, unsurprisingly, features a miniature woodblock print of militia women. From opera, calligraphy to storybooks, the propaganda strategy of associating Hua with militia followed that of Mao. The Red Lanterns Peking Opera, after a decade of delay, finally accomplished its 2 overdue tasks. The first was to propagandize the Everyone a Soldier campaign, and the second was to build the images of party leaders. While Mao's era had ended, it helped the successors of Mao to strengthen authority during a transitional period laden with political undercurrents. The evolving images of the Red Lanterns reveal how the symbolic power of women in general and women warriors in particular has been exploited to achieve specific political agendas in Chinese history.
Thanks so much for watching this talk, which was part of the Nationalism and Propaganda panel. If you haven't already, make sure to go check out the other 2 talks in this panel by clicking the links on screen now.